boxing championships on 4 continents, and all that. She had never left England, so I knew she didn't go to France to become a champion, or the United States. I was able to show what was real, what wasn't real, by looking at those kind of alternative sources.
Tell me where you were when the concept of your book, A History of Women's Boxing, came about.
Sure. I had finished my dissertation, my thesis rather, on women's boxing. It was looking at women at the gender binary. What is a man, what is a woman, and using the case of boxing as how it kind of goes back and forth and weaves around, and it's a boundary in motion, if you will, at different times historically. And I was giving a paper at a conference on women's boxing, and I was approached by a publisher who came to me and said, "Listen, we're expanding our titles on women's sports, and we have nothing on women's boxing. Would you be interested?" So I put together a proposal to write a history of the sport. They accepted it. I wrote the book, and the rest is kind of history. I was able to publish it. It became kind of iconographic as a reference work, as a point of departure. I will add, I call it a history of women's boxing because it's by no means definitive. There's stuff being teased out every day, and I'm really hopeful that other boxing historians will follow in my path and expand on my very bare bones research, if you will, to um, to widen the story and to tease out even more historical goodies related to the development of the sport, whether it's in the United States or other parts of the world. I will add, I've just finished my second book called The Promise of Women's Boxing, which looks at the sport over the arc of from what happened the day after the first London Olympic Games when competed in 2012 to now, and how what the impact of the Olympics had on the sport, and what the changing landscape of promotion and the place of women and their very evident skill level has had on the sport of boxing itself, and on the place of women as elite fighters in the professional and amateur ranks.
Right. Nice. Your love affair for boxing started at a young age. Tell me how your life changed when you walked into Gleason's gym in 1997.
Wow, that's a big one. It changed significantly. I think that my first trainer was a guy named Johnny Greenwich. He was kind of legendary, old school guy. He wouldn't even use pads. He just had you in there hitting the bag, starting me off on the wall bag, just doing a jab and a right, jab right, then jab jab right. Use the slip rope. Had me use a broomstick for all sorts of calisthenics. But his main thing was he didn't want to see pity pat. He wanted me to hit. He's like, if you're gonna hit, you're gonna hit hard. And so I started to learn the fundamentals of the sport and to hit the bag and to hit it very hard. And in that process, really stripped me down emotionally. It really ended up me having to beat down with myself in the sense of all those parts of my life that I had kind of held hidden from the world, my own sense of power, which I never really exerted. Women, especially women in my generation, I'm turning 70 this year. We were never like given permission to express ourselves physically, particularly, especially in any kind of power sense. So for me, those first forays at Gleason began to show me that I could actually have power, physical power. And it was a war really more with myself than anything else, to learn how to undo a lot of garbage and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering in my own life, undo the scars, if you will. And that became very powerful as a motivation for me personally, but also as a motivation to uncover why it was in particular that women were attracted to physical sports. And what I learned is that a lot of women in the sport have been physically assaulted or beaten or raped or have had a lot of tough things happen to them across their lives. And boxing becomes an island of salvation for learning how to become in control of one's own body and one's own physical power. And I was very drawn to that and drawn to these stories. So the impact has been uncalculable. It's also given me writing a way that I never could write before because you have to be you can't cheat when you're boxing. You cannot cheat boxing. You either are in it or you're not. And if you're not in it, you're going to get hurt. And what that gave me as a writer was that understanding of what truth is about in the work itself. And even though I'm writing history, I really wanted to make a narrative that was compelling and that drew in as a storyteller what the importance of these stories are and the fact that they exist and the fact that these women continue to work their hearts out for a sport that is unkind at best at times, and that it's still important for those stories to be out there for the wider world to understand that there are these group of warriors that put themselves on the line every time they step in the ring in a true life and death situation for something greater than themselves.
So in boxing, you've explained how everything channeled into your life, which is usually the case when we do something positive, right? It channels into everything else in our life. How did that channel into your writing and wanting to write?
I guess really, understanding that I could write a book at all, which had been my desire to do it, across a lifetime, and the fact that I actually wrote a book. It wasn't the great American novel that I assumed I would write, but it had power, and it continues to reverberate and have power. And it's when I write on a blog on girl boxing, I'm able to tell stories, or whether they're deeply personal insights in my own life, or talking about uh, boxers, or in the interviews that I've done with boxers over the years. Right now, I have taken on the role of caretaker for my husband who has dementia. So I like to tell those stories and bring into life that, whether a person is ill physically or has a degenerative neurological illness, they're still part of life, and we are still part of life as caregivers. So I just try to translate those truths into whatever medium I can. And in terms of writing, just use my voice in any way that I can with as much integrity and verisimilitude as I can.
Well, you're a fighter and a champion for what you do for your family. I'm sure it's greatly appreciated. And, that shows your strength. I just want to say that. So, this book, what's your favorite chapter?
Oh gosh. I actually had a love affair with each one. But I think in terms of stories, I write about this woman named Gussie Freeman. She she lived in what is now Williamsburg, Brooklyn. For those who are not in New York, that's a section of Brooklyn right over the Williamsburg Bridge, and is now a real like hipster place to live. But back in the day, it was really for poor folk. And in particular, it was an area where a lot of German immigrants came in the 1870s, 1860s, 1880s. And this woman, Gussie Freeman, lived in what is now West, euphemistically called Williamsburg West, but which is really Bushwick. And she grew up very, very poor. One of the things she used to do after school was walk along the rail lines to pick coal for her family because it was cold in winter and they couldn't afford coal. And from about the age of 12, she worked along what is now Newkirk I think it's Kirk Creek, New whatever, New something Creek, and they had what are called rope works because there was a lot of shipping in New York in those days, and the rope works were literally factories that made rope, and she worked in the rope works, and she was a rather large woman, large boned, and started fighting. She was scrappy and never really one for girls things. So she worked actually instead of doing the more delicate tasks that women were assigned to, making rope. She was outside loading trucks and or horse-drawn carts in those days. So she became very physically strong, and she was renowned for fighting. Well, there was a woman named Leslie Hattie Leslie. Sorry, she was one of two women who was as the female John Sullivan in the 1880s, a heavy, quote unquote, heavyweight boxer. And she used to do variety theater shows around the country. And she was coming to Brooklyn to a theater on Grand Avenue in Williamsburg. And as with many of these shows, she was offering $25 to any woman that could defeat her in 4 rounds of boxing. Well, everyone at the road work said, "Hey, we got to have Gussie Freeman. We got to have Gussie Freeman." So Gussie Freeman was name was put up, and she was came to fight Hattie Leslie on stage at Grand Avenue Theater. Now, this was a very big deal in Brooklyn. There were police everywhere. The Brooklyn Borough president was there. I mean, it was a very all the pals were there, all the police chiefs, and there was Hattie Leslie fighting, the hometown heroine Gussie Freeman, and they went several. They went like 3 rounds. I think it was called. I think somebody jumped up and said, "No, no, no, we're calling it enough." It was called a draw. But it was this extremely popular event in Brooklyn. And in fact, if you go through old issues of the Brooklyn Eagle online with the Brooklyn Library, you will find articles about Gussie Freeman and her her exploits as a boxer. She then went on to tour with Hattie Leslie very briefly in the Midwest because she was considered to be a great sparring partner, so they wanted to put her in the act. Things kind of got screwed up. She ended up back in New York, and then we find her later having had some backers, and she opened up a bar in Bushwick, and also kept fighting dogs. So she had fighting dogs at her bar, and then the next place where she ends up in kind of in the public eye is working as a stevedore, the only woman on the Brooklyn waterfront. And there's an article about her, right around 1900 about her exploits as the only female stevedore. People kind of followed her for years, trying to learn more about her. She ended up moving down to Florida and passed away, I guess, in the early 1930s. But I just love her story as a figure who is outside of what people think of as the normal female, Victorian lady who very much lived her own life. And I believe she was also a gay woman. She certainly lived with a woman for a number of years. What that really was about, I'll never know. But she did her best to live her life and was touched by boxing, but it helped inform her next exploits in life, which were very much entrepreneurial, and then beyond that, working as a stevedore, the only woman to do so in the New York waterfront, which is to me a huge opportunity and for any human to have that kind of a life. And the fact that it touched on boxing just gives me such a chuckle because so many stories in boxing are, it's one phase of a life. If you look at whether it's male boxing stories, women's boxing stories, it's very much about being working class and trying to improve yourself in some fashion. And for her, who started out life so poor, picking coal along the railway lines, It gave her an extraordinary life.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. And speaking of boxing stories, you wanted to paint the picture for us about women's boxing and their history. Now, the Ring magazine dubs your book the Bible of women's boxing. What does that mean to you?
It humbles me greatly. Um, when Tom Gerbasi penned that, when he did the review of the book, I burst into tears. To tell you the truth, it's one of those things in life one would never expect. Being in the Ring magazine at all is one of those things. But it humbles me because I feel the obligation and the responsibility to keep telling stories and to be current with boxing and to keep my integrity as a storyteller and to make sure that I'm there as a voice on behalf of women who are often voiceless and to make sure that those stories are always there. You know, when I'm on Twitter, I'm at Girl Boxing Now, and I'll comment, and you'll have boxing pundits put things like, "Well, what's the big fight you're looking forward to this month?" You know, and it's like, is it this versus this or this versus that? And I'll always put in a woman's bout. So this month I was like, well, the fight I really want to see is Makaela Mayer in England coming up to welterweight. That's the fight I care about. I want to see her fight Tasha Jonas for the IBF title. That's huge. So I'm always there to change the lens a little bit and say boxing is a big tent here, and what women are doing in the sport is valid, is important. It needs to be out there in the world, not as something that we set to the side. It is boxing. When a woman steps in the ring, puts her life on the line with extraordinary skills, that's boxing. It just so happens to be a female. And there are differences in physiology. So you're not going to see a 147-pound man fighting a 147-pound woman. Not a really great idea. But when you have 247-pound women at the elite level fighting for a title and you're in best versus best, that's just as valid as Terrence Crawford fighting at 147. Sorry.
And statistically, they put up a fight 95% of the time that they're in the ring. We can always expect exciting fights when the women are in there.
Absolutely. Listen, when Amanda Serrano fought Erica Cruz last February in Madison Square Garden for the undisputed featherweight title, they threw over 1,900 punches in 20 minutes. Okay, 20 minutes. Now, a man fighting, with the 12-3 is the typical men's championship bout. That's 36 minutes. These women fought 10 by 2. So they fought in 20 minutes. They threw over 1,900 punches in 20 minutes. I defy you to find any male boxer that does that. Guys 102 pounds. That's about it. So, and they were hard. They were tough. These women went into war. So yeah, women fight.
You spoke about how your vlog was instrumental in your book coming to fruition. Tell us about how your vlog came about.
Well, I started it in 2010 when I had gone back to school. A couple of things happened. I was back in school getting my master's degree, and I knew I needed to get used to writing because I had to write a thesis. The other thing that happened is my mother had passed away and that June, and I wanted to. I had this need to do something every day to kind of honor her in a way, because so I thought, well, if I have this blog, I'll write just about every day. It was like I need to do something every day that's positive in life. And so part of starting girlboxing.org was this idea of doing something positive every day, whether it's writing a piece or going to the gym or meditating for 5 minutes. I had to do something every day. and so the writing became part of that healing process, grieving process for my mom.
Thanks again for sharing that. You're also a co-host of your own podcast, WAR, WAAR, War Room Podcast. Tell us about what's it about and how people could tune in.
Sure. Well, I have two partners in that. Chris Ballman, we call Fight Goddess. She's out in LA. She does personal training and does a lot of work with boxers in terms of fitness. And Eddie Goldman, who we call the conscious of combat sports. He's a New York figure as a boxing writer and kind of combat sports writer, independent for many years. And the three of us started doing this show about 2.5 years ago. And we come on and we take topics and we look at them from a lens that don't deal with because we're not corporate media. We just have a love for the sport and a love for what people are doing. So what about we'll look at corruption in sports. We'll look at um, issues with amateur sports at the elite level and the problems that the IBA has been having with the Olympic team and the fact that they were kicked out of boxing. And right now, there is no boxing slated for LA in 2028 until something happens in terms of the governance of elite amateur sports. So we'll delve into topics like that. We also interview folks who may not ordinarily be interviewed. Like we interviewed Tiara Brown, who's a featherweight fighter who has really been looked over a lot of bigger fighters because she's really tough and really the real deal. And it's like, why aren't you getting the fights? How can we help you publicize what you're doing? So we'll do that. As I said, we'll interview individuals who may or may not be getting quite the coverage that they should be getting. We deal in topics related to sports corruption. We did a lot on the Daniel Kinahan gang and the impact that the Kinahans had on boxing itself and continues to have on boxing. We've been talking a lot about the Saudi connection in boxing that's been happening over the last 2 years, and what's that about in terms of sports washing, but also the deeper issues for Saudi Arabia wanting to kind of diversify who they are outside of oil, but what that really means to the sports world. They just bought heavyweight boxing on December 23rd, but hey, it was a great card. So what's the trade-off here? How are they upsetting the apple cart in terms of the promoters having to play nicely together in sand when they usually don't play at all? I mean, you had a whole slew of promoters that never play nicely together on that December 23rd card. So what's that impact? Or why is it that they've only ever had one female fight in Saudi Arabia in all the boxing that they've done, which was Ramla Ali? Great little boxer, but where's everybody else? So, you know, it's like, okay, you've got a lot of new players in the sport because everything else is kind of falling apart. We don't have HBO anymore. We don't have Showtime anymore for boxing in the United States. So there's less impetus, really no outlets to even show boxing at this point, other than DAZN and their regular deal with Golden Boy Promotions, or they're bringing their own UK fights to the US. What else is there? ESPN, what are they doing? A little bit of Top Rank. I mean, what's their fight going to be this weekend? It's going to be Makaela Mayer fighting Natasha Jonas in Liverpool. So there's been a huge shift. There aren't the big fights coming out of Las Vegas right now. Boxing in America is all about small venues, club fights. What are we broadcasting? The only stuff coming out is in the UK. We don't cover UK. We don't cover Argentina. We don't cover Mexico. We don't cover Japan. We barely cover Europe. So where are we really? And where we are really is Saudi Arabia buying boxing and a little bit in Dubai. So kind of an interesting time for the sport, and that's the kind of stuff that we tease out in our on our podcast. It's on YouTube, so you can find us at War Sports under YouTube, and you'll find our various podcasts.
And I'll drop the link in below in the description once this video is live. Let's talk about you being a founding board member of the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow. That is such an honor for me to work with Sue Fox. Sue Tiger Lily Fox. She was a 1970s boxer. She was fighting in 1978 on cards in Oregon and Vegas and I'm sorry, in Nevada and California. And then over 25 years ago, she started the Women's Boxing Archive Network, WBANJ. That was the first internet-based site for women boxers. And she became the nexus of women's boxing. She became the glue of the sport at a time when nobody gave a damn, when you couldn't find it anywhere. You'd find it on WBAN Boxing. I got to know Sue when I was writing my book, and when I started to do, articles on girl boxing about boxing, Sue and I started to become close. And then by the time my book came out and she was starting to think about starting the first women's boxing Hall of Fame, because at that point, the Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota wasn't doing anything. Nobody was doing anything for women. She did. And she invited me to join with her to start that organization, which she did with Wanda Contis and a bunch of others. And I was, as I said, I had the honor of being on the board and have continued to support her in her efforts. I have the honor of introducing I'm sort of the in-house historian, if you will, and it's my role at every live event to introduce the inductees, which is like the greatest thrill I ever have because I get to meet my heroes and heroines. It's kind of cool. But we just had our 10th anniversary we had a 2 night event in Vegas, sold out. It was fantastic. Our next event will be in April 2025, so we're really looking forward.
That'll be here in no time. You're also you're also an elector for the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I have the honor of being on the committee that selects the people you all vote on, and I'm also a voter. So I'm on the selection committee, and I actually, as an elector, I get to vote for who we induct into the Hall of Fame every year. So that's very exciting, and uh, it's one of those things. You were asking me before about the Ring magazine, what that was about. It's sort of like, yeah, it's kind of like the same. Like if you said to me 15 years ago, "Hey, guess what? You're going to be an elector for the International Boxing Hall of Fame," I said, "You're crazy." It's just one of those wonderful moments in life that happen. So I'm thrilled. I have the honor of writing up little bios. I'm writing a bio up right now on Ana Maria Torres, the great Mexican boxer who we're inducting into the 2020 Hall of Fame this year, alongside the great British boxer Jane Couch. So we have two great women being inducted this year. I'm thrilled.
Nice. You wear many hats in the sport of boxing. You're also a member of the Ring magazine's women's voting panel.
Yeah, we rank the women every week. We have we have all the weight classes. We have a top 5 list for women, and then we also have a pound for pound list. And we meet every week and go through who the fights were, what the fights were, and make decisions on some are rather agonizing on how to rank women in each individual weight class. With COVID and things really kind of got very slowed down for some women who couldn't box at all, while other women had opportunities. So we're still kind of dealing with ramifications of the loss in boxing. And as I said, now just all the shifts in promotion and opportunities for boxing shows it's really difficult for women to get fights. Even when you're Clarissa Shields, she hasn't fought since, and her next fight is actually going to be in MMA in Dubai, February. So, I'm sorry, in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. There'll be a PFL versus Bellator show, and she'll be participating on the undercard.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. I wanted to get your thoughts on her doing MMA while also being a top undisputed world champion.
Well, she's three-time undisputed 'cause she won middleweight twice, and, in 2 weight classes. You know, she got into it because for the same reason Amanda Serrano did, and the same reason Holly Holm did, the same reason Mark did, lack of opportunity and money. You know, that's the reality. Um, like, now she earns 7 figures, but she was always, ahead of the class, if you will, of what women's earnings potentials were once she turned pro in 2016. She was certainly starting to earn a decent living, but it's still not what her male counterparts earn. Can you imagine what a three-time undisputed male championship earns? She doesn't earn their bar bill for a year, even at $1 million. So, if she wants to earn money, it's been an MMA road. Same thing with Heather Hardy. Heather Hardy had her best payday as an MMA fighter until her last fight with Amanda Serrano this summer. Serrano, until she came to MVP, her best paydays were in MMA. So there's a real reason for that. There's also you're treated better. You're given more opportunity. You're given more promotion. You're not sitting there, you know, having to pound the pavement for yourself. Heather tells this story about how when her first Madison Square Garden fight was actually in MMA, and they got her a car to take her there. They did all this stuff for her, and she's like, "What? You mean I don't have to?" So, yeah, they're in it because they can earn a living, and they can't earn a living in boxing. And there's even at the lower levels, it's a better payday and a better opportunity. Boxing is a really hard sport, very hard sport.
I agree with you 100%. So you wrote about one of the women in the 2012 Olympics, Queen Underwood. She fought against Natasha Jonas, and Jonas is fighting this weekend in one of the biggest fights for women's fights. Tell us about that connection between Underwood, your book, Jonas, big fight.
Well, you know, again, Queen Underwood was one of the first 3 American, fighters to represent the United States at the Olympic as a female boxer. The team was Marlon Esparza was at 112 pounds, Queen Underwood, at, lightweight at 132, and Clarissa Shields, who fought at middleweight at 165. They were the first US team. Fortunately, Queen Underwood lost on the undercard, you know, in the early rounds in China. I'm sorry, in London at the London Games. Marlon Esparza went on to win a bronze medal at 112, and Clarissa Shields won the first of her 2 back-to-back gold medals because she also fought in 2016. Queen Underwood did not make the team in 2016. Makaela Mayer made that team at lightweight. She did not medal in that fight also in at the games. Clarissa Shields did medal, but Makaela Mayer opted to go pro after the 2016 Olympics. She went pro in 2017. Tasha Jonas also went pro after the 2016 Olympics. Um, and their pro careers kind of paralleled each other because they were both at lower weights. Makaela was competing at 130. Jonas was competing at 132 at lightweight. But she also went down to 130. She fought Katie Taylor at 132. She fought famously during the first COVID summer. She fought Terry Harper at 130. Very, very, very close fight. Considered by most to be the fight of the COVID summer. It was an extraordinary contest. Um, but she lost that fight. Many thought it was a gift. I'm not going to go into that one way or the other. But Tasha Jonas ended up climbing the ladder again. And what she opted to do was go jump to a higher weight. She went up to 140 and I'm sorry, 147, and she won at a higher weight. Sorry, at 154. Sorry, brain is. And she was able to win at 154. And actually, in 2022, sorry, in 20, yeah, she won three titles that year at 154. The only title so she only didn't have one, and Terry Harper had the other, and there was talk about doing an undisputed at 154. That never happened. But the thing about Tasha Jonas is that based on her extraordinary year in 2022, she won Fighter of the Year in the United Kingdom. The first time any woman won Fighter of the Year in the history of England, of the United Kingdom, and she won the Fighter. And the foreign Fighter of the Year was Clarissa Shields. Also, the first time a woman ever won. So you had two women won the one and number one and two spot in the United Kingdom last year. So extraordinary. There had been talk of maybe a Jonas Shields fight that never materialized. And now you have Jonas dropping down to 147, Makaela Mayer, who famously lost against Alycia Baumgardner, what everyone assumed she would win, kind of really screwed her up when she didn't win at 130. Took her a while to refocus, and she has stepped up in weight since then. She had a fight at 132, did really well. Then she had a fight at 140, did well. Landed on 100, in part because in the division you have Katie Taylor and Chantel Cameron now competing at 140. There's going to probably be a trilogy for them. So there's really no space in the 140 realm because right now Katie Taylor is holding the undisputed. Makaela Mayer does not want to cut weight anymore. She's tired of it. She wants to be in a more comfortable weight for herself. So she's landing on 147 in this fight with Natasha Jonas. And it really is elite Olympians fighting each other who have been through a lot of wars. They've been through tough losses. And so it makes for a very compelling fight. We also don't know yet whether it's going to be 2-minute rounds or 3 rounds. There's been some discussion both ways. And as of my last understanding, that was still a little bit unknown as of a couple of days ago. That could have been because there had been discussion about doing it, keeping it to 10 rounds, possibly doing it for 3 versus 2. Not sure how that landed.
You spoke about Alycia Baumgardner. The WBC just cleared her of any wrongdoing with PED. Any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts. Number one, the state of Michigan, who has governance, has abrogated their responsibilities entirely. So I find that to be shameful. Um, where are they? This is their jurisdiction. It's their responsibility to perform the governance. In that absence, it's allowed Alycia Baumgardner to show her own tests and everything else, which has nothing to do with the fact that a sample taken in July was positive. I mean, I commend that the WBC has done an investigation, but there are 3 other sanctioning bodies that have weight here. They're nowhere to be found. WBA, sorry, IBF, WBA, WBO. Where are they? And I know WBO had issued a show cause, but we have nothing on that. That was back at the end of October. And it's the responsibility of the state of Michigan. So, okay, reading through, it's kind of hard to really discern what the WBC is saying. They're saying, well, we cannot prove that she knowingly took a ped, although she's positive. So we're going to put her on probation because we can't prove that she knowingly took it. All right. What about everybody else? Where are we? And where is the state of Michigan, who is the governing body here? It is bad for boxing. It is bad for Alycia Baumgardner. It's bad for the fans that we have this continued question mark. And it's every single time. Listen, Hannah Gabriel's was found positive a year before, 6 months before that. We're still waiting on that one. I know they met because it's in the minutes, but the minutes weren't released, so we don't know what happened. And this is just two incidents for women, but there's a whole slew of incidents for men. And every jurisdiction is different, has different governing, and then we rely on the sanctioning bodies. They are all different. They have different responsibilities, rules, requirements. So I think it's a bloody mess and it's a disgrace to the sport.
Agreed. Agreed. Time is ticking, so let's see what happens. Let's see if any more people make any more statements. We shall see. You spoke briefly about the 3 2 minute 12 3 minute rounds, Serrano breaking that mold and moving into that direction. Give us your thoughts about that as an overall thing for women's boxing.
Well, women have been contesting 12 by 3, 15 by 3. I mean, since the inception of the sport in the 70s. So it's nothing new. The the rules, quote unquote, are 10-2, with the understanding that it's just a guide and it's up to any state in the United States, any state jurisdiction, plus the sanctioning bodies, to agree to changing it from 10 by 2 to 12 by 3 or 12 by or 10 by 3. For instance, very recently, Sinisa Estrada and Marlon Esparza had a WBA championship fight that was contested at 10 by 3. And both fighters have had 3-minute round fights as well. Um, so part of the issue is there's this sense that women's boxing is like, the little stepchild, and it's not real boxing because they don't really fight the way men fight, which is a bunch of horse pocky. But when you're listening to a fight on the that's being broadcast, especially a few years ago, you'd hear some snarky announcer go, "Well, it's only 10-minute rounds, 2-minute rounds, and it goes so fast, and they're only fighting for 10 minutes, 10 rounds." So it like sets it up like, oh, well, this isn't real boxing because it's only 2 minutes or it's only 10 rounds. Well, you're looking at something really exciting in those 10 by 2. It's different fighting.
And I tell you what, that announcer hasn't been in the ring for 2 minutes.
Exactly. Tell me about it. Exactly right. They're not sitting in that ring for 2 minutes throwing 100 punches, right? Which is what Amanda Serrano and Erica Cruz did in their 2 minutes, right? So it's really in that part of it is really infuriating, the lack of respect for what they do provide. This is a product, and the product is exciting. And let's tease that out some more. Well, you have promoters who really don't want to put women on their fights at all. PBC, when was the last time they had a female bout? Like years ago. Secondly, if you're fighting in a championship fight that's 10 by 2, that's 20 minutes of airtime, maybe 25, for the pre and the post. So you're adding another 5 minutes. That's it. That's not a lot of commitment that the promoter has to put in. Plus, they're paying crap. Um, if you have a male championship fight, it's 36. It's almost twice as long. So it's easy. Okay, so we'll put one girl fight in, and we'll make it a championship bout. Okay, so we get the sanctioning fee for WBC or IBF. They throw it in. They don't necessarily put it on the air. So it's low cost to them to put a 20-minute girl fight, right? If you start suddenly having 12 by 3, you got commitment here. Even if you're doing 3 by 10, it's commitment. You got time, you got money you got to pay. You got to pay somebody $3,000 for a 36-minute. I don't think so. So there's a lot of factors here that has nothing to do with women and nothing to do with they do or do not want to do. I write about this in my new book. I talk about a fighter, Olivia Guerrilla. Olivia Guerrilla is a championship boxer. She's from Canada. She's been a champion, I don't even know how many times over. She is now in the journeywoman part of her boxing life. She wrote about the fact there was a query on Twitter from our friends across the pond at Women's Fight who was asking about 2 versus 3 minute rounds. And Olivia Guerrilla said, listen, I earn $800 a round. If I'm gonna in a 2 minute fight, if I'm gonna fight in a 3 minute fight, I want 1,200. I want an extra $400 a round. What? $800 a round for a 20-year veteran? That's what she earns. She's fighting in 4 round fights, 6 round fights. That's boxing, okay? That's where women really are. I mean, yeah, it's great for Katie Taylor. I'm thrilled for Amanda. I want them to make money. I want them to be vocal. I want them to be screaming and yelling and saying, "My choice. I'm here to run my own apple cart. I'm on the horse. I'm driving the car here." But it's got to translate down the line. It's got to permeate what the promoters are able to do, and that they give a shit to do it. To put on something more than a 20 minutes max, because usually they have like an 8 rounder, so it's 16 minutes. That's it. That's it. Commitment, and it's not even on the air. So put the money exactly.
Well,
So
hopefully they get the idea. They start to do better. They start to pay more. They start to bring up the fights that we want. More, more exciting fights. That'll be great. Hey, Melissa, we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us so much knowledge and wisdom on your end of the spectrum in the sport of boxing. We thank you so much. We hope to have you on again soon and talking about more fights and more things in the sport.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your interest in women's boxing. I know it's real. I know you're really here for the women that fight in this game, and it really means so much to them and to me personally. Thank you.
You're welcome.